I would be remiss if I did not ask you about your day in Butler. And I even feel weird bringing it up because I imagine it's partially traumatic. I know you were there with your daughter, with your son-in-law. Tell me, without giving too much away from the book, what's your most salient memory from being there in Butler on the ground on July 13th?
I think the thing that stands out to me is, first of all, when I get there, it's very joyous. If you've ever gone
Mm-hmm.
to a Trump event, they are. It's like a Jimmy Buffett concert without the Hawaiian shirts and parrot hats,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead, people are in patriotic gear and red hats, and so that is always a constant. But I watched President Trump. I wasn't supposed to be in the buffer,
Right.
and President Trump wasn't supposed to do what he did. And Corey Compatore, the man that lost his life, he wasn't supposed to be sitting where he was.
Mm.
But I'm watching him come out on the stage. I talked to him 4 minutes before he walked on the stage. 4 minutes.
Wow.
He wanted to say hi to me because I was going to fly to Bedminster and interview him on the plane. That's why I'm standing there. That's not where journalists stand.
Mhm.
Photojournalists do, but not reporters.
Right.
And so I'm standing there. I had said hi to him. He always says the same thing when he sees me. Salena, you have the best hair in America. And I always think, yeah, no, when I get embarrassed.
It's thick hair, okay? I need to take my biotin, my Nutrafol. You have me thinking I need to amp up my game. We'll get to your hair in a second, but go back to your story.
So I only talked to him 4 minutes before. I get put in the buffer because now
Hmm.
I'm going to go on the motorcade and go on the plane. So
Hmm.
they tell me to work my way around. That's why when you look at the cover, my daughter took that cover shot
Wow.
because we were following President Trump out there
Hmm.
in the buffer, which is like a well that goes around the
Hmm.
stage. And I remember getting off to the side because, I obey. They told me to go to the side and be ready. So I was ready. And he does two things that he never does. Never. He puts a chart down. And I turned to my daughter. I remember saying this. What is he, Ross Perot now? Because Ross Perot was famous for his charts, not
Yes.
for his personality, but for his charts.
Hmm.
And then he turns his head. Now, if you've ever gone or watched in detail a Trump rally, the president and the rally attendees, it's a very transactional relationship. They feed off of him, he feeds off of them. So for him to turn his head was nothing he's ever done before.
Hmm.
And he does. And it's that is when the four shots go over my head and I see him grab his ear. I see the blood streak across his face. And I see a sea of navy blue suits just surround him in a
Hmm.
protective stance. And then there's four more shots. I'm still standing. At this
Hmm.
moment, I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about two things. Is the president okay? And dear God, don't let anybody be hurt in the stance. And so that really stands out to me that day. And I think it's important to say, President Trump called me the next morning, called me first thing the next morning. And he said, Salena, are you okay? Is your daughter okay? Again, my daughter was a photojournalist taking the photos. And
Hmm.
I said, and he goes, and I'm so sorry about I didn't get to do the interview. And I did something that my parents, when they read the book, are going to be so mad at me. It's more like a truck driver because it's like, Mr. President, are you bleeping kidding me? Like you were just shot. I'm not worried about an interview. And thank you for thinking of me. We went on to have 7 very powerful interviews that morning.
Hmm.
That also stands out to me. And I think the thing that stands out the most, and it's a common thread throughout the book, and it makes you understand what continued to happen in that election that people didn't see and people didn't understand, and what
Hmm.
continues to happen today, is that he told me when he said fight, 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 was not because that wasn't me. That wasn't about me. That was about I am a former president. I might likely be a president again. I have a duty and an obligation to promote, to show strength, to
Hmm.
show that we are resilient, that we have grit, that we are exceptional. We live up to those ideals. I also knew if I didn't do that, the people behind me would panic, and there was possibly people watching that would panic.
Absolutely. The word grit is one of my favorite words in politics. I think Bobby has it. I think President Trump has it. There are a few other folks in the administration who really have that grit and that character and that resolve. And when he got up and he said, fight, 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 no one has ever looked cooler or more badass in American history ever. And I think it's one of those moments we all remember where we were. I remember I was at home watching and you're like, what's going on? What's happening? And then you're thinking of the people there. I mean, when he got up and said, fight, 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 that is when I knew this man is going to win in November because Joe Biden, Kamala Harris cannot compete with this, Salena.
Yeah. And you know what people missed after that is how much it changed the American electorate. And even with, so that happens, the press, my profession that I'm embarrassed to say that I'm part of at times, immediately forgot it because Biden drops out. And then Kennedy is shortly after named to gives his endorsement. That was also a game changer, especially in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio. Why? Because of suburban mothers. Suburban moms heard what he was saying. They listened to what he was saying. They are skeptical of the government. Their children were kept back. Their children were impacted health-wise, but also mental health-wise by what happened during COVID. And that galvanized women in a way. I remember writing about it and people giving me crap about it, saying that's not true, you're lying. I'm like, no, like I'm interviewing women. And I also saw suburban women right after the President Trump was shot who put on the red hat, who in college educated suburban women. And people said, and I asked them, it's in the book, why are you doing this? And they're like, hey, he took a bullet for me. I can definitely wear a red hat.
Totally. I definitely think this Maha MAGA coalition was super helpful in this election. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but something you and I haven't spoken about is on January 20th, 2024, a few days after the Iowa caucus, I sent an email to Bobby and all the senior staff. So Amarella's his daughter-in-law and some of the other people. And I said, we should endorse President Trump. Let's try and get a seat at the table to tackle chronic disease and health and all these things. And I'm not going to go into my private discussion with Bobby about that. He was open to the idea then, but it just took about 8 months for it to come together. I thought it might come together in Milwaukee at the RNC, and it didn't, but it finally came together. I think also one of the most iconic moments in Arizona in August, that endorsement coming out to the Foo Fighters song was just incredible. It
was incredible. And y'all took out the wind of Harris's convention because you did it on Friday. And they're talking about Harris, and he walks out and I'm like, my profession does not understand this moment. And it's profound and it's important.
They didn't understand it. And I think the mainstream media and a lot of these left-wing journalists, they realized once and for all in this election, I think some still haven't, but a lot of them realized, oh, we don't actually have that much influence. Because for us on the campaign, we could barely get booked in mainstream media. They wouldn't give us live interviews. And so we would do TikTok videos. You know, I was writing scripts for TikToks because I was like the TikTok guy. And we were just trying to circumvent the mainstream media. And you realize now you look at the ratings on networks like MSNBC, they're not talking to anyone. They're just really not talking to anyone. So it'll be interesting to see into the midterms in 2028 how everything plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that my profession doesn't understand the durability and the strength of this coalition. That every time something is just a little off, it's like, it's over. Democrats are going to win. And I'm like, no, y'all don't understand how durable this is. You more so don't understand is how much you have lost these voters.
Right. They betrayed the trust of the American people when they spent 4 years gaslighting them, saying Joe Biden was this spry whippersnapper who was doing cartwheels in private. And we were all seeing with our own eyes that the man was non-compos mentis and was not well whatsoever. But the last thing I want to ask you about, because I know you're a busy woman, I heard you were on Hannity, you're doing so much media. I said, I'm so grateful to have you. I don't want to waste your time. Here. Thank you. I want to ask you though, because something I've talked about a lot with my followers and other folks in DC is we still want answers as to how Thomas Crooks was able to climb onto a rooftop in broad daylight, why Kimberly Cheadle, the Secret Service director at the time, allowed this to happen. And then she made some weird statement at the time. I think she alleged that the roof was sloped a little bit and they couldn't put agents on it. What are your thoughts on Thomas Crooks? And do you think we're ever going to get more answers into what really unfolded that day?
So a lot of what was bad about that day was the incompetency and the decisions made by the Secret Service. It's just another layer of us not trusting our institutions to do things that are keep us safe, keep us protected. More importantly, in terms of the Secret Service, keep the president, the former president of the United States, safe. It was and part of the biggest failure is so simple in that the Secret Service failed to stay connected with other law enforcement that know the Butler farm grounds, but law enforcement that know the trees, the water tower. They, this is their beat, this is their stomping ground, and nope, y'all aren't allowed to be integrated with our radio system. And I think it's arrogance and incompetence more than anything.